everybody, to today's webinar, the Supplier Operator Disconnect, what frankly we're all too polite to say. We're glad that you're here, but before we dive in, we want to send you a quick note that this session is being recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording with all the attendees and RSVPs once the event wraps. I'm Tony Sousa. I'm a friend and, of course, fan and partner with WithMe, home of Print With Me and Sip With Me. Their smartest amenities serve over 3 million residents nationwide and are designed to elevate the resident experience, streamline on-site operations, and help property teams manage costs more effectively. Right now, when you book and attend a 15-minute demo with Print With Me or Sip With Me by March 27th, so in just a couple of weeks, they're going to give you a $25 Amazon gift card. So they want to pay you to hang out with you. Today's conversation tackles something many of us feel but don't always say out loud. The growing tension between operators and suppliers. Operators are juggling more than ever before, and suppliers are trying harder than ever to break through. Somewhere along the way, that partnership has really gotten complicated, and we're going to address it today. We've assembled an incredible panel that we plan to have a candid conversation about what's really happening, and more importantly, how we can move forward. And also, an important note, we're going to be opening up things at the later half of the webinar for Q&A. This is going to be an important part of today's session, so be sure to be active and in the chat with your questions for our panelists today. So be sure to drop those questions in. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, so we'll get started right away. Thanks, panelists, for being here today. Alex, we'll start with you.
My name is Alex LaFlam. I'm the National Account Executive for WithMe. I come from 15 plus years on the operator side, and the last 5 have been on the supplier side. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Tony.
Awesome. Well, we're excited you're here. We got some background noise. That's okay. It's a live webinar. Mike, we'll go with you next. Mike, you're a well-known face, but tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, super happy to be here, Tony. My name is Mike Wolber. I serve as the Chief Sales Officer for a beautiful business called Apartment List. Been here for about 2 years, and I've spent the last 12 plus years leading go-to-market and revenue orgs for businesses of all shapes and sizes. So I'm excited to share some learnings, but also to learn from the panel today. And special thanks to WithMe for making today happen.
Awesome. Mike, always good to have you. And last, but of course, not least, Mr. Schoen, tell us who you are and what you do.
All right, great. Thanks, Tony. Happy to be here. And thanks for everyone for joining. Name is Sean Richardson, Vice President of Procurement at RPM Living. I've been in the industry for procurement this is actually, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but this actually starts 36 years in the field of being a procurement practitioner. Wow. So, I'm excited to share some industry insights and perspective across multiple industries. Most of my time has been in the energy and the manufacturing sector, and the last 2 years here at RPM in the multifamily.
Well, I've had the pleasure to work alongside you, different departments, of course, and you bring a wealth of experience not only to your organization, RPM, but of course today's panel. So thanks for being here today, and thank you all panelists, and again all the attendees for being here today. Before we get into some of the solutions and strategies and some of the feedback, really the environment that we just talked about and outlined has clearly sort of grown into a wider disconnect in some ways. And we're going to talk about some things that are working well, but we want to talk about, kind of the environment that we operate in currently. And obviously there's tension between operators and suppliers in a different way than ever before. And so, Mike, I'd like to start with you. Obviously, you've been on the forefront of relationship building for the last, we'll call it a decade plus, right? From your perspective, what do you think has changed in multifamily and the supplier-operator dynamic really over the last couple of years, maybe post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think a ton has changed these past 3-4 years. I think one is that multifamily used to kind of be the best kept secret, and folks are realizing that vertical specific software is a really great way to scale and build a business. And so as a byproduct, we've seen capital become more and more available these past few years. And for anyone who attends an NA Apartmentalize and OpTech, we were all at RetCon this past week, you're seeing year on year, significant growth, way more vendors being created than operators on the customer side. So that's led to some noise. And I think right now, if you empathize with the customer, it's like harder than ever to filter through what is need to have versus what is nice to have. And I think the third thing that's like really changed all of us, whether it's for the good or for the bad, is that it's never been easier to scrape an attendee list and send out 19 unpersonalized emails. And so I think as a
Mhm.
byproduct, it just led to a feeling of how do you filter or how do you just start to ignore? So I think it's created a really big disconnect these past few years that's been quite palpable and almost always top of mind, no matter who you're talking to.
Yeah, very true. And it's awesome we get a chance to talk about this today. And obviously it's real talk about a real situation that I think both operators and suppliers are facing. Mike, thanks for that insight from your perspective. Alex, I'd like to get your thoughts. You've been in the business a while now. I won't date you. Maybe less than Sean. Maybe not. I don't know. But uh, you've been both on the operator and now on the supplier side. And so,
Mhm.
what have you seen happening over the last so many years post-pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I will say just over the years in general, I've seen technology evolve, what's required being on site. I mean, I was there through the pandemic, and I will say that was one of the craziest times.
Mhm.
There's a lot more pressures for the on-site team and just operations in general of what they have to attend to because of that. And then also on the vendor side, I think there's been, a lot more too exploding on the technology side with vendors, what choices are out there now. It can be kind of overwhelming to kind of sort through that. And like Mike said, what's needed, what's not needed, what's on the wish list. So I think there's a lot of oversaturation with technology. So it's making it a little bit tougher of knowing who to talk to, and how to sort through all of that.
Mhm. Sean, your take on this? Obviously, I think you've been there. Maybe not. Obviously, you've been at RPM for some time now. You've probably seen some evolution happening over the time that you've been there. Obviously, you've been in procurement departments much of your entire career. What have you seen, specifically in multifamily over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think uh, we probably have seen it across multiple industries, not just multifamily, but post-pandemic. And you think about market instabilities. I oftentimes think of what's been most recent and on the minds of a lot of people is around the tariffs, both on the vendor side and on the procurement side. So through my lens, I think there's been more focus on the need for relationships,
Mm,
and looking at partnerships with our vendor base because it's critical on the communication piece that where there's good alignment to close any gaps that might exist because there are different expectations. So what I've seen is moving more away from transactional to more of a relationships,
mhm.
and in doing so, there's increased alignment on priorities and as I oftentimes think of just the lift and shift that happens every day on on-site teams because they're just dealing with emergency needs. And in the meantime, you got procurement folks like making sure like we're being very conscious of the dollars, the budgets, and making sure we're delivering the best net operating income opportunity back into the ownership. So there's a good friction point there. So it's important for both. Well, actually, that whole little triangle, procurement, on-site operators, and vendors, to be aligned and together.
Well, thank you, Sean, for that take. Can you tell maybe those who are new to the supplier community or maybe even new to multifamily, what role, because the procurement departments in multifamily really have exploded over the last, we'll call it 5+ years. And obviously there's a much needed place for your department to do what you guys do. You guys do a lot of things. Can you help us those listening, help us understand exactly what you and your department does, not necessarily just at your company, but within the industry.
Yeah, great question. I can share through. I've only been in the multifamily for 2 years, but I've been able
Mhm.
to make some really wonderful contacts
Yeah.
with peers to me at other property and fee-based management companies.
Hmm.
And we all face the same battles, but when we look at our categories of spend, because we're trying to make sure we're delivering, and that's the value prop for procurement, deliver the best total value back into the ownership. So we analyze data and we look for those opportunities where we can consolidate, the vendor base and or look for better cost savings that we can deliver, and make life just a bit easier for the on-site operators. So it's almost like an Amazon effect of you go in, you push a button, and then there you are. So we look for those opportunities to put national procurement agreements in place. And if that's the case, then we will market that internal to the operators so that all the on-site teams understand, who we have in the certain category of need. Likewise, when we do this type of due diligence, we might discover that it's not a national type program, but maybe it's more local and regional. And then we'll do a lot of the work on behalf of the on-site team so that they don't have to spend their time basically playing the role of procurement, but they can play the role of what they're doing to support the on-site operations and the resident needs. And so in that case, we'll play more of a role of a consultant, and we'll work with the on-site teams to bring to them the providers that they might need. So I think from a vendor perspective, it's kind of important to understand that, like you said early on, that over the last really 3 to 5 years, a lot of property management companies have hired procurement people because they're starting to see the value in put the focus on the skill set of those folks that know how to go out and source, do market intelligence, negotiate, and put contracts in place. So it frees up the time for the folks on site to do their strong skill sets, which is to support the operations and manage the resident experience.
Yeah. Well said, and thank you for kind of that context of what you and your team does. And I thought what you said, and that I learned, and what you said just now, is you guys also are open to looking at regional partnerships, not just always national. And I think there's some confusion at times that it's always just a large MSA or national contract that's in place. Sounds like you guys kind of take a nuanced approach, as I assume most big brands would wisely do, because not every market, not every region is exactly the same. So thanks for sharing that.
That's right.
You mentioned relationships. Relationships are key. You hear a lot about that, Mike. I'd love to get your thoughts here. You're somebody that's built tremendous relationships across the industry for many years now. You heard what Sean had to say, and relationships are key to it all. So, what's your take on relationships, and do you have a philosophy on these relationships that you espouse to your teams and to the greater industry?
Definitely. I think they've never mattered more. We've moved to this like hybrid selling environment. A lot of us are comfortable in a virtual first environment for the first time, over these past 5-6 years. I think philosophy number one for me is you never waste a conversation. I think too often we beg and plead for this like 30-minute call or this 15-minute miraculous coffee meeting at RecCon this week. And all we show up with is a pitch deck. Not like a reason to engage, not curiosity about the person, but it's just like, hey, here's our product and we solve problems for everybody. Well, hey, man, you never asked me about my problems, whatever it might be. So one is just like never waste a conversation. And I think number two is like curiosity wins always. You've got to be curious. If you're not curious and to learn it all in this space, I mean, the dynamic in 26 compared to when I first started selling in this industry after leaving Nike back in 2015, it's a completely different space. It's a completely different environment, which means you've got to have a learn it all environment. I think that's bred from being curious. And I think the third one is you've got to have a reason to reach out. Too often when it comes to relationships, whether they're personal or commercial, which a lot of mine are because I do work with customers that I try to create value for every day, you have to have a reason for the conversation. I think a lot of times we waste that at bat for the sake of habit. And I think that's super, super important.
You mentioned, I think, point 1 and 3 had similar themes to them, Mike, in regards to wasteful communication and time that you have. And we all know, operators are very busy, and Sean, you and your team are very busy as well. And so you don't have a lot of time to waste, ultimately, is the point that you're making, Mike. Any suggestion, kind of high level on how to maximize a 15-minute coffee meeting?
For sure. I think if you're going to go into a conversation, you've earned that at bat. you got to show up prepared. You work back. Like, let's say you're 2 weeks out from a conference and you got 7 senior level leaders to say yes to a 15 or 30-minute conversation. Well, now the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be maniacal about making sure that every single one of those is a well-researched conversation.
Mm.
Now, when I visit a property, I'm not asking the property to sign a contract. I'm going in to validate a hypothesis that I have, and I'm giving them something in order to show an exchange of time and to demonstrate some gratitude and professionalism, something a lot of us have absolutely forgotten about over these last 4 or 5 years. I
Mhm.
think it's really important to make sure that you show up with value that you can create, not just to consume value from the person that you're engaging with.
Mhm.
And that's where I like really believe in this concept of the best salespeople, the best sales leaders show up as T-shaped, which means they
Mhm.
can cover a lot of surface area, which is industry, things that you and your customer can care about. But then depth, like the deep part of the T, means I've got to be a product expert and a category expert. So that even if we don't talk about my product, I can give you some perspective on what I'm seeing work around people just like you. And all of that takes time to show up and really maximize that 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those insights, Mike. Those are great insights for anybody listening, and I took a lot away from that as well, Mike. Thank you for sharing that. Alex, I'd like to get your thoughts on the relationship question as well. You obviously interact with executives, decision makers, as well as regional managers and site team level as well. How important is that relationship there? And first and foremost, like you have to understand who makes those decisions, and I think that's a big question mark for a lot of suppliers. In a lot of different segments of our industry. But how do you go about building that relationship? And what do you often either get out of that relationship or try to give, to Mike's point?
Yeah, I mean, I think every relationship that you approach is different, right? You need to understand the decision process of whoever your client is. And I think one of the biggest things for me, especially coming from both sides, I think one of the key points to building a huge relationship is transparency on
Mm.
both sides, because what I'm finding, like, once I kind of crossed over to this side, I feel like people hold back telling things. So I really like to open up
What do
and
you,
just be
so give
like,
us, so Alex, I think that's a great point. I don't mean to cut you off, but give us an
yeah.
example of that. Like what's being held back? Is it product delays or issues with service? And I'm not, using, your particular product, for example, but you probably hear it amongst your peers and other things like that. It sounds like there's transparency is key, and sometimes it's not always happening. Can you give us any sort of general example of what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes internally, like there might be some greater challenges going on, and clients might not be fully transparent about that. And it may come
Mhm.
across like um, that, they might be ignoring us or anything like that. So I think it's always good to open up and
On both
just,
sides. Hmm.
yes, on both sides, like no matter good, bad, tell me everything. I always say that because obviously I know they're dealing with a lot coming from that world.
Hmm.
And so I can understand like their pain points, timelines. Like, for instance, I had one, person that I was dealing with, and, they were just ready to move forward, but then they had to like kind of pull back because they ended up going through some vacancy loss and all of those issues. And then once they kind of told me and opened up, being empathetic to that, giving them more of a cush timeline and stuff, and just kind of understanding their needs and being able to align with what they need for down the road and hold off, I think was really great, instead of me continuing to hammer them with emails or calls or trying to get them on a meeting. I just think transparency works good both ends. So, we're not being annoying vendors and suppliers, and that we're able to make sure that we're working it where it works for you and your timeline. So I just think it's number one, I think, with building relationships to tell that. So
I think that's great, and thanks for being willing to go there. I think communication and transparency is going to be key as we move forward, especially in tough economic climates. Lots of options. Sean, I'd like to get your response to a few things that were said there. Communication transparency is key. What I hear a lot from suppliers oftentimes is we can't get a response back, right? And so that being what it is. I'd like the audience and specifically the supplier group to also know how many emails and pings you and your team are getting, just so they can, help them understand that it's nothing personal and that it is the massive amount of touch points and pings that you guys are getting are huge. Would you mind sort of telling us exactly kind of what your day to day kind of looks like when it comes to that?
Yeah, no, I heard a couple chuckles on that. Yeah, it's uh, the amount of emails that just procurement gets, and I've talked with on-site teams, and they too are just swamped with emails, and even all the way up the chain inside our operations. It becomes unrealistic, obviously, to be able to be all things for all people at all times. So I think something Mike said earlier was really important, like which was uh, don't waste the communication opportunity. So I think it's very critical from the supplier side to make sure like they've done some research on us, understand our business, understand our model. Also, like you know, when you do get that opportunity to talk to us, like ask questions. Like Mike was spot on when he said, be curious. So be curious to understand what's our pain point, what works well, what's the pressures that we're under. Um, is more that you understand our pressure points in our business, the more likely I'm going to respond to a cold call email, quite honestly. Or if you happen just to show up at the doorstep, um, you're more likely going to get some FaceTime. But not doing your homework up front and understanding it, it's you're wasting it and that opportunity. And I'll give a quick example. I just came from a conference. Everybody loves to see they see a guy walking around with a VP of procurement. Oh, he's a decision maker.
You were the belle of the ball.
Yeah, but everybody swamps you, right? So I get stopped. They're so focused on delivering their pitch. They don't ask me questions about my business. What are my priorities? And it's hard for me to be fully transparent with a vendor or a supplier in moments like that because I'm not sensing that they're really interested in solving problems.
Well,
So I think that's first and foremost really critical. Don't just be out there to give a pitch. Have a purpose behind it. Um, the amount of emails and phone calls, like the things that trigger me, I'll be quite honestly, is if I do see an email or I receive a phone call and it's very obvious that they have taken the time to do a lot of research into our company. And if they want to talk very specific about a group of properties throughout the country, that they've actually understand the makeup of the properties, how many units, and they understand like there's a turn ratio of X%, things that they can do to help. So I think what makes you different than the next player, and so understanding your competitors in the space as well is really important to get the attention from us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those honest stories. Mike, I got a question for you, and I hear what Sean says all the time from the operator side is stop pitching me, right? There's the term I won't even say it because it's a PG audience, but there's a slap involved with a pitch, and but Mike, I want to ask you, why do you think suppliers feel as though they have to, in every human interaction, pitch their product? I see it, I see it all the time myself. I try to provide feedback to suppliers as well and tell them that usually doesn't work very well. Um, and maybe some are better at conversationally pitching than others. You tell us. Obviously, you have the experience here, but why does it feel like there's such urgency to have to pitch in every interaction when every operator I talk to says, please don't do that?
I think it's really bred from two things. I think it's bred from an insecurity, like I don't know what I don't know, and so as a byproduct,
I'm going to talk about what I know.
it is vulnerable to ask someone in a big role with 36 years of experience to teach me about procurement. That's really vulnerable because as a salesperson, we're taught to posture, right? And so I think there is like an insecurity that you have to be comfortable overcoming to not feel like the pitch slap is the right first approach. But I think the second thing is that, we probably have an opportunity on the technology supplier partner side of the industry to really invest in like better ramp metrics to make sure that before we're releasing our salespeople and our go-to-market pros into the field, that they're actually taught how to run a world-class discovery call. And I think those are just some of the foundational elements that we all know matter. But whether goals are too aggressive or whether we just don't know what we don't know, I think it also is something that a lot of companies can solve. And one of the things we talked about during our, prep call for this is that I really believe that a great sales motion should always include a leader, especially when you're talking to a senior level executive, so that I can catch you if you fall. And then
So,
over
so,
time, I'll
so
back
Mike,
up.
Mike, say that again because I think it's an important point that you're making. You're saying every sales demo should have, especially with a senior level executive on the operator or buying side, should have an executive leader or some level, high level leader from the supplier side on that call just to see how things are going.
Yeah, I mean, like I think about every sales touch with a customer or a potential customer as an at bat. And some of those at bats are more in the learning stage, right? Where I don't need to be involved, or one of my, incredible leaders don't need to be involved. But once you finally earn that like real conversation, whether it's virtual or in person, never waste an at bat. And if your sales leadership team can support you in, building or accelerating pipeline, that means they need to be on the calls and on the road with you so they can catch you when you fall. And great things happen in helping your team ramp, learn, and grow along the way too.
Very well said, Alex. What are your thoughts to that? You've been on both sides. Obviously, there's a lot of pitching going on. And Mike, you make some great points there. Alex, any thoughts there?
I feel like when somebody's new and when I was new, you feel like this constraint of like you only have this certain amount of time with these people that you finally lock down a meeting. And I think discovery is super important, like understanding all of their needs, letting them talk. And I think, somebody is jumping to the vendor side and you're getting that 15-minute call, but I think it's also crucial for the follow-up, to make sure that you are scheduling that next touch point to keep things going. And then that's a point of where you can say, okay, I heard your issues. Now we can align with our product and what's best. So I think that's always a good thing to remember, that make sure you schedule that follow-up call so then you can finally have those things and not feel so panicked that you need to get it out the first time.
Yeah, I think you guys make a really good point, Sean. I think you probably sense that as well. What I heard there is sort of a lot of emotions are going involved in this. I feel like I have to pitch, and I only have 2 minutes to say everything I need to know. I assume, Sean, what you would prefer them to come to you and say, listen, like, tell me more about what you do. Tell me more about your business. This is the little bit that I do know. Tell me if I'm off, tell me if I'm wrong, and how can I better serve your business? I assume that type of approach. Listen, I'm a long-time operator. I'm learning the sales process as a consultant myself, so I am a true learning the sales process. But it always felt like the authentic, transparent approach in communication always seems to land better than worse. Sean, I'd love to get your thoughts based on Mike and Alex's feedback there.
Yeah, no, and I will say over the years, I've learned to kind of compartmentalize different suppliers out there in terms of those who are really good about just giving a pitch and those that are actually more genuine and authentic, who care more about aligning their product to my problems that I'm trying to solve, and then the conversation feels more like a partnership,
How do
and
you
naturally you gravitate toward that.
Yeah, great answer. But how do you decipher that? Is that just a
Yeah.
is that just a gut feeling? Is that 36 years of experience? Like what is that
Yeah, I think it's probably there's no right
combination?
recipe on that. It's probably all of that, but I would say some things that are important. If I were to tell the audience here, one thing that they really need to take away from a vendor perspective is learn your elevator pitch.
Mm,
That's the why, and the why. And I give you an example. One of my uh, leaders years ago, as at Roche Diagnostics, he got in the elevator with me. Goes, Sean, you got. I think we're going to go to the 6th floor. We're at the 1st floor. So, but by the time that door opens, I need to know the why that I need to invest in a certain software stack to help you move your business forward. Let me tell you, that was so stressful. But
Mm.
I was able to gather my thoughts extremely quickly and to deliver it. And so I just think if folks would just take the time and I think just relax a little bit. Don't always be in sales mode, because a procurement guy or gal will be able to figure out that you're just in it to make the commission dollars. You're not in it to form a partnership and a relationship and to help you solve a problem. So get to the why, be succinct and deliver it, but be very authentic with it.
Mm.
Because, like I said, an experienced or a well seasoned professional will be able to read between the lines, and then you will lose them. So don't do that. And then I would say something Mike said was like, when you do get that opportunity to deliver, to do a demo, I just gone through a couple things here recently at RPM where the the biggest miss was the vendor didn't take the time to know who was going to be on my side of the room in the meeting, and they did not match. I'll just say, like, we had some senior level folks on the call, and they did not, and they didn't bring a lot of people. So we start to try to figure out, like, are they taking this as serious as we are? Look, we're making this commitment. Are you making this commitment? And then, because like I said, we're moving from a position of let's build partnership relationships, not transactional opportunities. And so we're looking for that to be matched.
Well, I think you make some really, really great points there. One of the biggest takeaways is, relax. You don't always have to be pitching or selling in every interaction, because the reality is on the reverse side, as a longtime operator, you're not always in, and I don't want to speak for you, Show, but you're not always in buying mode or evaluation mode. You're often sure you're working, but you're in a very sort of human mode, right? You just want to interact with somebody, and really, I think you've articulated very well. You're looking and really using both your experience and your gut senses. Is this person interested in a partnership with me based on how they're interacting with me, or are they just trying to sell me a product potentially that I don't even need, right? Because a partner would never do that, right, in a relationship, and in that interaction, that's the quick trigger right away to say, listen, maybe you're not a partner, maybe you're just purely a salesperson trying to sell me something I don't need. And so I think you had some great things to say there, Mike. I see your body language twitching a little bit, like you got some good things to say. Any thoughts to what Sean just said?
No, I just hope people listening, whether you're on the selling side or the consumer operator side, values the name of the game. I think one of the greatest ways to build trust, like let's just use Sean as an example, who's managing procurement for one of the biggest operators that exists in the USA. Like, should be really important that when you engage with someone that they get value from you early, even if it means, hey, we're a terrible fit. I'm looking at your integration requirements. I'm looking at your contract management requirements. We're not ready for the big leagues. Here are 3 companies that we lose to all the time that I would recommend you work with. And when we're ready, would you be okay if I reached back out to you? Like, imagine the trust I just built in a 5-minute discussion, giving him 25 back. No one does that. But the people who do, they win. And over time, even if they leave companies to go to other ones, they build so much trust and value that, like, that's what separates the great from the mediocre.
Yeah, Mike, I think you make such a great point. And listen, there's a lot of movement in our industry, both on the operator side and supplier side. But if you've built that well of trust, if you will, for lack of a better term, over your career, and you're willing to have those 5-minute conversations to say, I don't think we're a good fit. I think everybody on this call, especially on the operator side, would say, listen, we'll do business with you regardless of what company you may be with, because that trust can't be duplicated or replicated. And I think you make such a good point that the game is about trust and credibility and building partnerships. It's not so much about pitching a product per se. And ideally, the product hopefully is a great fit, ideally. But if it's not, then you have to be willing to say that. I think we're talking about a lot of value and really reducing, burden on the teams as well. And it's something I've seen the WithMe team and the WithMe product, Print With Me and Sit With Me, do an incredible job of providing, and removing burdens from the site team as well. And obviously, Alex, you could speak to that on a daily basis. I'd like to talk about some of the big wins that you've seen in your career, because we've talked a lot about some of the tough stuff, and I think there's been some great comments, and I see the chat blowing up as well, and that's exciting. But I'd like to talk about the wins and the relationships that have been long lasting potentially, and how they started as well. And Alex, I'll start with you. You've been very patient thus far in this latter part of this conversation. So I'd like to get your thoughts on and your experience, and maybe any example of some big wins either you've had recently or you've had in your career. And the win I mean by is a great relationship between you as the operator, maybe in a former life, or now you as a supplier with an operator. Can you share with us some wins that you've seen that have been really rooted in trust and really turned out to be great partnerships?
Yeah. Well, when I first got into the industry, I will tell you, I was handed a whole bunch of national accounts where I felt like we weren't having a consistent touch basis with. And so really, I thought that was very important to make sure that we were continually checking in, not like the contract sign, you're set to go. We don't ever have to do that. I think it's the follow up after check-ins, making sure everything's working, especially as a salesperson, showing that you do care. And then becoming creative, right? I think I'm always an advocate for all of my clients, right? If there's something that they need and is outside of the box, my bosses will tell you, I'm going to go rally and try to make sure that we figure something out that does work for them. I think that's a big thing is, you can say, here's my product, here's all the cool things we have, but maybe we're missing something that we're not aligning on. And what is your client's goals? And I think if you can really like change that and make something work for them, you build some trust and you know that they feel that you're doing everything possible that you can to win the relationship. I had one relationship that I can think about that started 4 years ago when I got into the industry. And I will say the procurement people, they're very tough. Like if something goes wrong, they're the first people to call me and definitely rip into me. I had one that was extremely tough and, um, I just followed up. I kept on making sure that I got ingrained with everything, not only on the sales side, but support. Sorry, there's background noise coming through.
It's okay.
Um, but I thought it was super important to know my business inside and out, know their business inside and out, and be involved in every single touch point for my client, regardless if it was billing, support, all of that. I want to be in it and making sure that they're having a good experience across the board. So that was where I started seeing like a client relationship that was handled poorly before I got there, and just being super involved and ingrained and understanding and making sure we turn that around. And I felt like, moving companies, it's opened those conversations to my new companies because I had such a good trust with that client and built that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Sean, obviously you have a lot of decades in the game as well, and probably a deep well to refer to in regards to wins. I know we've talked a lot about some of the missteps that you're seeing along the way, or recommendations that you're suggesting along the way. But what are some of those wins that you've had in your career? And I assume that they've been long lasting, if I was to guess as well.
Yeah, no, good points. I think maybe I'll start with the foundation of what I think some of the items Alex just mentioned. So I think what builds to the wins that I've experienced is through these partnerships with particular suppliers. I'm not going to name names, but I'll definitely give an example of one. And it was during COVID when everybody was fighting to find PPE gear. Um, I'm now referencing something back in the manufacturing sector, but
Yeah.
we couldn't
No, it's
get
still very
product.
relevant. Yeah.
It's relevant to the point of everybody in the industry was struggling to get the necessary personal protective items for them. But through this partnership, with this vendor, which was built on, having a good relationship, a normal cadence of regular communication. So we put together a two-way scorecard, and I'd call this more around elevating the supplier management practices. I think Alex said best earlier when she said, when the contract's signed, that's not where it ends. It's where it actually begins. And
Mm.
so having a regular cadence of meetings and understandings of what's important for us to be measured. Likewise, if I'm on the vendor side, like what do we need to do better on the buy side, basically, to make life easier for you? So that's what I mean by a two-way scorecard, that we're both in it together from a relationship and partnership perspective. That builds innovation. So innovation of new thoughts, what's going on in the market, your product launches, things that are in your pipeline that actually could better improve the operations of what we do and what we need. We talk a whole lot about transparency. That builds complete transparency from both sides, which ultimately builds trust, and then just the accountability. Like, now I feel accountable to it. It's like any relationship that you're in, whether it's your spouse, your partner, or whatever. Is like, it only works if the communication from both sides, they're all vested, they're all in, and you treat it again with the most respect of being genuine, authentic partnership. And because of that foundation, the need that we had as a company who was desperately needing all this PPE gear to continue our operations came about because of all that foundation that we had with this particular provider, who went through the global ecosystem to find everything we needed, and we never were without. They
Wow.
met our needs and met us where we were.
Wow. Very well said. Thank you for that story. And obviously, it's a story that all of us in multifamily can relate to during that time and really across the world. Uh, and it was predicated on relationships you had prior to that event, right? And so you build into those relationships, not knowing that a pandemic would occur, but if a crisis did occur, that I can count on my partners and my relationships that I have in the business to help support me in that situation. And you being a good partner in that relationship would be able to help them when they need it, maybe down the line as well. I think you make some really great points there.
Yeah, no, a good point there, Tony. 'Cause that's the other thing too, is like they met us where we were. Likewise, can you imagine how much sweat equity I'm going to throw into this relationship to make sure we meet their needs? What do they have? Because I think of now, like when we were dealing with the tariff situation and uncontrolled price increases. So just being able to be fair and reasonable with them and negotiating something that's fair, because we don't want them to lose money. I mean, if our vendors lose money, it doesn't benefit us, because we don't want them to go away, right? We need them, right? As much as they need us, we need them.
Well, I think that in a nutshell is sort of why we call each other partners in this industry. And I think, over the last couple of years, and ultimately why we're having this call, and thank you all for being on this call, is that partnership. There feels like there's some friction there, right? And I think we need to get back to what that partnership needs to be, or what it was maybe in the past, or what it can be. Let's be honest, right? The world is ever changing, and so same with a relationship, same with a partnership, and so you need to continue to evolve and change and grow together as the world changes in the marketplace and in life. Let's be honest, Mike. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think Sean just hit a home run with his answer. Is very, very well said, and with just great articulation, but also just, I think, resonated with all of us just in regards to being a good partner. Mike, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm not sure how the hell I'm supposed to follow up what Sean just said, but the initial question was just like kind of this concept of like a great win. And I'd be remiss not to say that like any big W I can talk about over the last 12 years has come from a team effort. It's never come from me. And so I think the like number one win has always been making sure that I'm confident that I have the right team. And if there's like one thing I'm incredibly surgical about when I'm early into onboarding into a business, it's being dang confident that I've got the right people on the bus and eventually the right people on the right chair. And I think the second kind of component of any of the great wins that I've been fortunate to be a part of have been really creating a mutual win-win. It was a big win for our business, and it was a hopefully bigger win for the customer we were serving, which leads into like the third, like biggest lesson I've learned over and over again, is that they've always been a long game. They've never been a short adrenaline hit. They've been a long, frustrating pursuit of a championship, not making it to first base. And I'll give you like an example without naming names. I know we're trying to be somewhat sanitized. We were selling into a top 15 third-party management company in my last company, and early had an opportunity to sell to a regional manager. And it would have been an adrenaline hit. It would have been like 2,000 units. But you have to understand how this industry works. If you sneak in a contract bottoms up without getting top down buy-in, it is the fastest way to getting blacklisted and to getting removed from the ability to get the showns and the corporate executives to be excited about a partnership. So I said no when we had an opportunity to sign a contract, which really ticked off my sales team. But then we reached out top down, explained that there was an opportunity on site, but we wanted to do the right thing for the organization. And it took us over a year to get to the point where we signed a full portfolio, multi-million-dollar deal. And to this day, I'm not even at the organization. When I reconnect with that individual at the executive level, they're still thankful. They're still using the product. And you talk about trust. And that came from understanding the industry, playing a long game, but also creating a very mutual win-win with the right team.
How do you, Mike, incredible stories, man. Thanks for sharing those. And it's awesome that you still have those relationships. And I'm sure when you run into them at conferences, they probably still go out of the way to thank you for being transparent and honest. And obviously you're playing the long game just as well as anybody else in the game, let's be honest. Any thoughts to, we've mentioned the long game a few different times, and I know we're kind of coming into the, Q&A segment here. And so I don't want this to go too much further, but there's such pressure in the short game. So it's hard to have a long game perspective sometimes on the sales side. Any recommendations for those on the supplier side to kind of find that balance in short-term perspectives? And obviously you got to meet your quotas this month, this quarter, but still play the long game. Any mindset shifts or perspectives you recommend there?
Yeah, two, and I'll be brief here because we're coming up on time. One, never burn a bridge. And number two is have the mindset that your job is to turn every customer into a raving fan.
Mm.
And if you operate with those two premises, like write them on your whiteboard, put them those as a sticky note, like you got to make sure that the activities and the actions you are taking are in alignment with something personal. Those two mean a lot to me. Never burn a bridge. And I want every customer to be a raving fan. And not everyone can be a raving fan. So you've got to make sure you're selling to the right people, knowing who you should be working with. But those are two that I would say like matter a lot for me that I've seen work for others.
Yeah, very well said. And the reality is, you didn't mention a timeline on any one of those answers, right? It was serve your customer, give it value. The time will work itself out. And ideally, on the sales side, supplier side, you want things sooner than later. But when that buying partner is ready, they're ready, and they want to feel trust in a solid partnership when they're ready. Alex, we're going to pivot just as we conclude here, and we're going to transition into some Q&A. What are you excited about going forward? Some things to build on with relationships you've seen out in the field. I know you spend a lot of time in the field with mid-level and executives as well as site teams. What are you excited about in the future, just with these relationships as they continue to strengthen?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, because I'm passionate on both sides, is just seeing how the industry's evolved with technology. I think it's so exciting. I wish I had all of these cool things when I was on site. It would have made my life easier. So I just think it's really interesting to see. And I'm interested to see what's kind of next out there of like what's the new big prop tech company that's coming in. But it's just like I said, so exciting. I love being on the helpful side of things, and just seeing where this industry is going and how powerful like it is when you are building a community and you're serving back to the community of giving homes, right? It's super personal, and how us as partners that we feed into that. It's such an important thing to have. There's a shortage of housing and it's needed. So we're doing God's work out there, I think. So everybody
Well,
is.
Thanks, Alex,
Yeah.
for that answer. And we're going to get to Q&A. So start to get your questions top of mind, folks. We're going to try to get to as many as we can in the chat. But before we get to questions, Sean, I'd like to give you that last question about kind of how are you framing the future through your team and seeing the industry as it's continuing to emerge. We've heard a lot about technology. That continues to play a big role in what we do. How are you seeing the future through your lens?
Everybody's talking about AI, right? How to embed AI in processes, and which is very important. I preparing my team in terms of like knowing where that's a fit, and knowing how to be more efficient in how we operate on our side to support, and really deliver more of an extraordinary experience to our on-site operators. That takes a lot of commitment around making sure we keep things personal. I call it lace up the tennis shoes and get out and meet people where they're at. And that's what we're trying to do. I think understanding the tech stack on the operations side, understanding the marketplace, and doing a lot of benchmarking and networking helps bring a little bit more intelligence for us to partner and collaborate. I think that's the key for us when we deal with not just the vendor community, but the on-site operators. Like I started out with earlier, it is a triangle effect. To stay and operate inside that triangle, to make sure that we're all together in one accord, unified in our messaging. And I think a lot of people get nervous when they hear that procurement's involved. I want to remove all stigma, that we're not like the big beast in the room. We do look at total value. So don't come to us only with cost and you can save us money. I mean, matter of fact, that eliminate that from your pitch. That should be a byproduct of the value of your product that you're trying to tell us that we might need to help resolve some of the problems we have. Keeping it authentic and genuine is really critical. Staying inside the triangle and make sure there's good collaboration and communication. And that's what I'm trying to frame up for our procurement group as we go out and deliver the extraordinary experience in supporting our on-site operators.
Well, thank you for summing that up in such a great way. And to Mike's point, we went about 50 minutes without talking about AI. Surprisingly,
Awesome.
I think that's a win, right? To some extent. Obviously, this wasn't a webinar focused on AI, but obviously, it's a big part of our lives day to day. And now, obviously, going forward, AI will probably revolutionize a little bit of everything. I'm sure it's very much on all your radars as well. So let's jump over to the chat. I know we got a question there. We'd love to get more of your questions as well. So feel free to jump in there. First question I do want to address, and Mike, I'll hand this to you. I maybe know your answer, but it's from Paul there, and he says there are many supplier partner sales folks who work for many different companies. How difficult is it for operators sometimes to take those calls, thinking, "But wait, just a few months ago you were selling for this"? I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, just how important it is to build trust regardless of where you're at. But I'd love to get your thoughts there. Paul, thanks for the question.
For sure. I mean, it's an awesome question. And I think it's an awesome challenge for anyone who's in a hiring leader style capacity is that, there's this belief that oftentimes you have to hire someone with a Rolodex in order to win as you scale a business. And I love hiring people that have never sold into multifamily before because they bring in a hard sales skill set and I can teach them about the industry and our business can teach them about it. If I'm hiring somebody who has been back to back to back to back software or service or amenity style selling companies, I want to talk to customers they've sold to more than once to make sure that they have created value, but also not sold the same people every single time. Because there's such a risk here. If every company you work for is the best company ever, you're being dishonest. Like there are more losers right now than winners in prop tech. And so I think it's really important that you are able to find the balance there, because if you become too relationship centric, you create a little bit of risk for the business. Because if I've been 7 or 8 companies in a row where they've all been the best and the baddest, there's a fast path to eroding trust with that same circle that you sell to. So I think it's important to find a balance when you're hiring, but also to make sure that from a customer's perspective, which Sean would be better to speak to this than I would, to make sure that you also learn the difference between, is this a friend or is this a commercial relationship I have with someone? Because those two things can be complicated. They just can.
Sure. Very, very complicated at times as well. Thanks, Mike, for that. We'll jump over just for the sake of time. Jean Francois, I love the name. In a market that feels saturated with prop tech solutions, where do you see real white space or unmet need for operators? Sean, if you're willing to maybe briefly answer that one there, in a saturated space, where do you see some opportunity?
Well, that's a good question because especially in the tech space, you go to conferences, you go to vendor expos, and it's like it becomes blurry. I mean, it's like at some point you've heard the same you've seen the same demo, you've heard the same speech around it. For us, it's hard. So I think just understanding what the differentiator, the unique piece of the feature and functionality of your
Mhm.
tool is, if they can, like I said, it's so important that my message to the vendor community would be really know your competitors in this space and be able to identify the differentiator of your product versus their product. And then that is the so what and the why to come to me to educate me, because I I can't, like I said earlier, I can't be all things for all things, all people for everything. So I
Yeah.
do depend a lot on our vendor community to provide a lot of intel. And so I think that's the important attribute that I will look for when I'm talking with a vendor, is just the
Yeah.
differentiator.
Sean, we're going to stay with you. So catch your breath there. We got a couple questions about trade shows and the value. Mike wrote a great piece recently, a national trade show and the value there. How do you decide, showing you and your team, what trade shows you guys are going to? Another question from Michael Zimmerman. There seems to be a lot of fatigue around trade shows and probably fatigue around emails as well. How can the industry fix this problem so it's beneficial to both suppliers and operators? Essentially, the conference challenge that we're facing.
Oh boy. Wow. Okay.
You're
So,
like, pass the
uh,
mic.
yeah, this is like, so from a procurement perspective, I attend a lot of conferences, both in the multifamily and then like what I was sharing with the group earlier, I just came from a more procurement
Yeah.
practitioner
Hmm.
conference. So vendor expo fatigue is a real thing. And like I said, it becomes really blurry because you're starting to see the same product, the same pitch, same demos, and you start to lose interest. Um, I think what is more meaningful and what has worked for, I'm going to speak through my experience,
Sure, please.
is the vendors who are going to be hosting a booth and have access to the list of attendees. Again, if you just be very targeted, like don't send me some chat GPT message that looks standard and not authentic, because I
Uh-oh.
again, we can read it and it's going to fade away. But understand who I am, our business, and maybe do a little research, and then send me a more genuine message to meet before or outside of that vendor expo so that we can meet in person and talk. It's about the conversation. It's not about me walking up to your booth and seeing a demo because now I know I'm going to get a pitch. So that is a expo fatigue is a real thing. I think to be impactful is to figure out how you can do what I just said, pull us out of the vendor expo, meet with us one on one to have a genuine conversation.
Mike, I'll let you respond to that since you wrote a great piece and a great recap just on the recent conference as well.
Yeah, my call to action here is for the event hosts themselves to take it really personally to create more value for operators and for vendors. Make it easier for both stakeholders to walk away saying, hell yeah. Survey every single customer attendee. What are their top 3 priorities? And then be the matchmaker. Make it easy for our team to not send 5,000 emails a day and to be able to walk in with the 30 important conversations so that we can walk away with some sourced pipeline, some influenced pipeline, and some incredible new customer potential. And then we will cut the same check again the next year, an even bigger one. But I think the friction is real right now. And if it doesn't change, there is going to be a rip tide of what the participation looks like in these next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thanks for being honest about that. And obviously, I think a lot of us sense, a lot of what you just said as well. It's hopefully it gets fixed. I think we're excited and we're optimistic that obviously
Definitely.
there's innovation that comes to the forefront in how we're coming together. Well, listen, guys, we're out of time. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. This was a robust discussion. I learned a whole bunch. Hopefully, you guys did as well. And a special thank you to the WithMe team for putting this webinar together. Thank you very much and allowing me to be a part of it as well. They will be sending out the link to everyone who was on the call. So if you missed anything or you had to leave early, you will be getting this link as well. Again, thank you for everyone for joining us. Panelists, thank you for being here today and carving out a little bit of time of your day. It was an incredibly beneficial webinar. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.